So Assange has granted asylum, Ecuador, has granted Assange asylum, but as we can see, it looks like this is just the beginning of another chapter of the Assange saga. So where do we go from here? RT correspondent Kristine Frazao has been following the story closely and joins us now live from the White House to weigh in. So Kristine, what is next for Julian Assange?
Well, Liz, I think we're going to find out a lot more in the next coming days ahead. Right now, it's a very good question. As Laura Smith mentioned earlier in the show, Julian Assange might be safe and welcomed to Ecuador, but the question is, how does he get from London to Ecuador? A whole lot of people wondering that. As she mentioned also, he has been told time and time again by British authorities that if he sets any foot off the premises, that he will be promptly arrested. A lot of people wondering today as well what Julian Assange will do once he gets to Ecuador. Will he continue to run WikiLeaks? Will he be able to get funding for it? People wondering as well if Sweden will continue to try to extradite him, and if also the U.S. will get involved. Remember, I'm sure we've mentioned this a few times during this hour, but Julian Assange has not been formally charged. He is merely wanted for questioning in Sweden. Now, we have heard that Julian Assange plans to make a statement outside of the embassy on Sunday. I think we will learn a lot more. But he did release a very short statement today upon finding out the news, and I just want to read you a small part of that. He said, "While today is a historic victory, our struggles have just begun. The unprecedented U.S. investigation against WikiLeaks must be stopped." And he also said, while today much of the focus will be on the decision of the Ecuadorian government, it is just as important that we remember Bradley Manning has been detained without trial for over 800 days. So Julian Assange, they're really trying to shift the spotlight to Bradley Manning, remembering that he was arrested more than 2 years ago, accused of, being the person behind leaking all these documents to the whistleblowing website, and yet he still is sort of in pretrial hearing mode right now.
Now, as we kind of wait and see how both cases play out, many revelations have come out through WikiLeaks. What have the leaks brought to light?
Well, it's really interesting. I would say in a nutshell, it's really taught the world a whole lot about geopolitics that we didn't know. What we see on TV and some of the relationships and the images presented to us in public are not exactly as they seem in private. Now, let me give you an example. According to cables revealed by WikiLeaks, Saudi Arabia, a close U.S. ally, actually has major distrust for two Muslim countries, at least two, Pakistan and Iran, and has even at times really persuaded and tried to convince the U.S. to get even more involved in stopping the nuclear program in Iran. That was something I think that a whole lot of people were unaware that was going on. When you look closer at the U.S. itself, certainly one of the major controversies revealed by WikiLeaks was the Secretary of State's office. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton actually issued orders to have members of the UN Security Council, top officials from China, Russia, the UK, to have them spied on. So that was certainly something that a lot of people were unhappy that information came out. And then, of course, kind of focusing on the wars that this country has been involved in, is still involved in Afghanistan and in Iraq, of course. A lot of information that we were told several years ago by former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld proved not to be true, and it turned out that even the Pentagon at the time knew that a lot of this information wasn't true. But Liz, I gotta say, some of the most damning evidence and some of the most memorable things that have come out of WikiLeaks have to do with that video that was released, Collateral Murder. Let me just show you part of that.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire! Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
This video, of course, showing two Apache pilots, two members of the U.S. military, sort of treating war like a video game in some cases, killing several civilians, and it's all documented on camera, including two journalists from Reuters. Reuters was told it was a very different situation that had happened. So that was really interesting, and it's very different to see something like that in front of your face as opposed to sort of scrolling through all these documents. So certainly that was one of the most significant revelations that WikiLeaks has given to the world.
Well, certainly that video and some of these documents, they were both shocking and embarrassing. If he does end up in the United States, what fate could possibly await him?
Well, again, we should mention no charges have been filed against Julian Assange by the United States. Assange himself and his attorneys worry, though, if he's extradited to Sweden, that he will then be extradited to the United States, where he could face questioning, face charges having to do with the Espionage Act. A lot of people kind of making the same case for WikiLeaks that they're trying to make for Bradley Manning and really haven't been able to do so very articulately yet. But they're trying to make the case that the release of these documents, that the release of this video, for example, has put the U.S. safety and security in jeopardy. That's the take of a whole lot of people. And that is one reason that a whole lot of countries and a whole lot of officials in this country want to see Julian Assange have his day in court.
All right, Kristine, thanks so much for keeping us updated. That was RT correspondent Kristine Frazao.